Hello, everyone, and thank you to the third episode of my new podcast, Neurochaos. I have a guest today that I am very excited about interviewing. I have known Marcella, for how long? 7?
Yes, almost, 8 years, more than 8 years now.
More than 8 years.
Yep.
And you were a patient.
I was a patient.
Marcella Piper-Terry is incredibly knowledgeable about vaccines and COVID. You come from a strong scientific background.
Yes, I have a master's science degree.
Well, let me set the table
Okay.
real quick,
Yeah.
guys. So, as I've told you guys, the first 2 episodes, I'm a chiropractor. And so I practice under a board, as all medical professionals do. And I do not feel safe, even with the current climate, to always say exactly what I think, because I don't have that freedom. I have a friend, Dr. Eric Naputi, who's very well known in St. Louis, and he spoke out during the COVID pandemic. He was one of the brave ones, and I admire that because I kept a low profile back then. And for his bravery, he was rewarded with a 508 billion with a B, punitive damages by the FTC, by a committee that never existed prior to COVID, and nobody understands their rules. Nobody knows what is safe to say and not to say. So before we get started today, we're going to deep dive into long COVID vaccines, spike protein, and vaccines in general. And that is a ton of information to cover. So we can't cover it all today. Today is setting the stage for a series of 3 to 4
We're going to do
episodes.
series.
We are. I'm so excited.
I am too.
So let me read the statement that I have to read. I want to be clear that today's conversation is for educational and informational purposes only. The views shared by Marcella is their own and do not represent medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for any individual. This discussion is not intended to replace your relationship with your licensed medical provider. Any health decision should be made in consultation with a qualified professional who knows your personal medical history. So now that is out of the way.
Yes.
Marcella, tell me how you got involved in the anti-vaccine movement.
Okay. So first of all, the anti-vaccine movement represents a lot of people who were not anti-vaccine forever. Unlike, and I did watch your previous episode, and I know you, we're friends, and so I know you're the daughter of chiropractors and you've never had a vaccine in your life. That was not the case for me. I was very much about the science. I have a Master of Science degree with a dual track in clinical and experimental psychology. Experimental psychology was my love, and a lot of people don't realize that experimental psychology is actually the field of research. They're the ones that started that established the whole experimental model for clinical research. Mm-hmm. So I love research, and my goal was to be a clinical researcher at the CDC. And that's where I was headed. And so I did really well in my undergrad and my graduate degrees. I had a full ride at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., with a teaching assistantship. And I had won a national award for my research abilities as a master's student. And so my ticket was pretty much punched, and I was headed to the CDC to be a researcher. And I had waited to go into the PhD program until my daughter went into kindergarten. And she got her standard round of kindergarten shots and had a very serious reaction. And she developed tics and seizures and OCD. And
you were doing what you thought was the responsible
absolutely
thing.
Oh, I always did. I was She was a very high-risk pregnancy. I had multiple miscarriages prior. I didn't know at the time that I had MTHFR genetic mutations, which make a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal. And but I felt so fortunate to have the opportunity to have this amazing baby. So I did everything I was told, including 2 RhoGAM shots during the pregnancy. I did not get a flu shot or a Tdap during the pregnancy because at that time they weren't pushing them. This was 32 years ago now. Anyway, my daughter, she had significant reactions to vaccines, and I didn't realize what it was that happened because we were also living on base at Andrews Air Force Base. It was a very stressful time. We were there during 9/11. And so I attributed a lot of her symptoms to just the stress of moving and the environment and all of those things. But it became clear over time what had happened to her. And I started, because of those challenges, I did not stay in the PhD program at George Washington University. I had to drop out and stay home with her as much as possible. And I worked in a neuropsych private practice there in Washington, D.C. For those 3 years. But I was kind of dragged into it. I definitely was not an anti-vaxxer. I did everything I was told, completely by the book. And my daughter was injured. And so there's a lot of us in what is known as the anti-vaccine movement who are actually ex-vaxxers. That's what we refer to ourselves as ex-vaxxers. So that's how I got into it. And there is a saying among those of us in the movement where, we talk about genetics load the gun and vaccines pull the trigger for many of us. And I think you touched a little bit about epigenetics in your previous podcast. And that became something that was really important to me, looking at epigenetics and how, some people say that vaccines don't cause autism because if vaccines cause autism, all children who were vaccinated would have autism.
Right.
And that just doesn't make sense. It throws out the concept of individuality. And so my goal and the kind of trajectory of this experience for me over the last 25 plus years has been to figure out why some people react at elevated rates when some people don't seem to react at all. So there is epigenetics, is the interaction of our genes and the environment. And it has to do with not just vaccines, but glyphosate, pesticides, artificial colors and dyes in our foods that aren't really foods. So there's a whole lot of factors. There are a whole lot of factors that go into priming a system to make one more vulnerable. And you touched on this with Ehlers-Danlos as well. There's a really good article written by a Midwestern doctor on Substack, and I think I sent it to you when we were talking about Ehlers-Danlos.
Yes, love that article.
It's a great article about hypermobility, Ehlers-Danlos, and he calls it ligamentous laxicity, which I love. Ligamentous laxicity and increased vulnerability to vaccine injury. It's a great article. I recommend reading it. You may have to pay a very small fee to subscribe to his to a Midwestern doctor's on stack, but it's totally worth it. And if anyone who has any suspicion of Ehlers-Danlos or concern about loose joints, what you were talking about, I think it's very, very underdiagnosed, and I think it is a major risk factor that has not been identified yet. But vaccines are a public health measure. So when you think about vaccination and where those recommendations come from, vaccines are clinically trialed on very select participants who do not have diagnosed issues with autoimmunity or those kinds of things. They are people in general who are right in the broad range of average. But when we talk about autoimmunity and things that might increase the risk In general, the more autoimmunity someone has in their family, autoimmune thyroid disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, those kinds of things, those are signals that the immune system is already ramped up. The immune system is set higher, and the reactivity and the inflammation is set higher at the baseline than what would be expected in the broad range of average. So if you're out here and you're kind of an outlier and you have this genetic predisposition, things that are given to those people who don't have that, they may do okay. They may have subclinical reactivity that may affect them in the long run, but that does not manifest quickly. And that's very common. It can be years later. There's a book written by, oh my goodness, what is his name? He's the father of autoimmunity. I can't think of his name, but he wrote a book, a textbook, graduate level textbook on autoimmunity and vaccines. And you can Google it or, whatever search engine you like.
We can put it in the comments for you guys.
But he, in his research and writing, he has made the statement that autoimmune reactions and adverse reactions to vaccines can take as long as 8 years to develop.
Oh my goodness.
So it can be a smoldering fire, or it can be throwing gasoline and immediate explosion.
Just overnight.
It depends on the individuality of the person. And that's where we get into the difference between public health and individual health.
And I don't think public health necessarily considers individual health. I mean, this study, so if I'm hearing you correctly, they don't test vaccines on unhealthy subjects.
Right.
Average people.
Right.
Healthy people. Mm-hmm. Also, I have a question that just came up. Would you say the COVID vaccine, and, not all those vaccines were the same.
Right.
There's the mRNA and, different ones, Moderna, Pfizer. Would you say those also just affected vulnerable individuals, or did it also affect healthy individuals? Is that one different?
That one is very different. And it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for a lot of people who've been studying vaccines and writing about vaccines for a long time to refer to the COVID shots as a vaccine. They actually, during the pandemic and during the time when the vaccines were being rolled out, they changed the definition of what a vaccine is on the HHS website. It used to be that a vaccine was something that contained a little bit of an antigen. So if it was a polio vaccine, it would contain a little bit of the polio antigen. And it oftentimes contained an adjuvant. And an adjuvant is generally aluminum, which is neurotoxic and also immune toxic to some people more than others. But a vaccine generally was considered to be a certain subset of product that behaved in a certain way. With the COVID mRNA vaccines, mRNA shots, they're not anything like what we have always considered to be vaccines. They are gene therapy products. They alter the genetics of the cell, because with the mRNA vaccines or the mRNA shots, what they did is they took the spike protein of the coronavirus. And we need to talk about that too. Is it a coronavirus? Is it a true virus? We're going to get into that.
We'll start to today.
We'll start to get into that today.
Hot topic.
Yeah, very hot topic.
What is a spike protein, Marcella?
So a spike protein is, there are other viruses that have spike proteins on them. A spike protein is when you look at the image of the coronavirus and it looks like a red ball and it's got these things on the outside of it.
Antennas.
And and they do look like antennas. It comes out and it's got a little ball on the end of it. Mm-hmm. That's a spike. And the spike protein, what it does is it butts up against the cell in your body and it fuses with it, and then it opens up the cell membrane and deposits its payload. into the cell. So that's how it infects the cell, and that's how it spreads in the body. So the spike protein, what we know now, what the research is showing now, is that spike protein is actually a very toxic part of the coronavirus. So the theory on the development of the mRNA vaccines, what they did is they took a code and they inserted, like a computer code, and they inserted this code into lipid nanoparticles, which are in themselves highly inflammatory and toxic in the body. The lipid nanoparticles contain the code for the body to teach the body to produce spike protein in the body. And that, so the body starts producing spike protein, and the immune system is supposed to learn from that how to react and how to protect against coronavirus infection. The problem is, for a subset of the population, there's a study, I think it was published in February of this year, that showed they looked at people who were having long COVID symptoms after vaccination with COVID vaccine. So now there is something in the lexicon they're referring to as long vax syndrome, LVS. And there's also spikeopathy, which is an umbrella term that encompasses both long COVID and long vax syndrome. The symptoms can be identical. A recent study from Peter McCullough's group at the Wellness Company, they did a study looking at groups of people who had long COVID symptoms, and they separated them. They looked at people who had COVID infection, but who did not get the shots. And they looked at people who had COVID shots, but to their knowledge, never had COVID infection. And then they looked at people who had both. And they wanted to see the continuum of symptoms and severity of impairment based on infection alone, injection alone, or both, infection and injection. And what they found was that the severity of symptoms and the difficulty with recovery was very strongly tied to which group you fell into. And those who are having the hardest time with recovery and the most significant symptoms are people who got the COVID shots and then got COVID after they got the shots. And historically, that makes sense to me. And they call it the hybrid harms hypothesis. Historically, that makes sense to me because I've been in this space for a long time. I knew quite a bit about Anthony Fauci before he became America's scientist. And I've known about Anthony Fauci and about problematic things in his history, including the treatment of children during AZT trials with HIV. The things that he has done in the past, I never, ever could have seen him as America's darling because I knew too much about him ahead of time. So it made me concerned about that because I knew that he had been one of Anthony Fauci's primary goals, from my perspective and from what I understood, was that he wanted to develop a coronavirus vaccine. And he'd been trying to develop a coronavirus vaccine since the first SARS outbreak in 2002, 2003.
Is this documented?
Yes. Yes. And I also knew when they started talking about Wuhan, that rang a bell with me because I knew that gain-of-function research in the United States had been shut down during the Obama administration in 2012.
Could I interrupt you
Absolutely,
just for a
please.
second? I was not quite clear on gain of function, and I want to make sure I have a good understanding of it now.
Okay.
As far as I understand, gain of function means you're studying a virus, and then you're kind of adding things to make that virus more lethal.
Yes.
Now, the official line is you're doing that so we kind of can get prepared for what if that happened.
Right.
That's the official version of what that is. Do you agree with that definition?
I agree with that definition. gain of function research has been historically a collaboration between the military and the government public health agencies. And gain of function, the rationale that Dr. Fauci has put forward for continuing with gain of function research is exactly what you just said, that we need to be prepared. So we create something so that we know how to fight it, which doesn't really make sense to me, but that is the rationale that Dr. Fauci has publicly stated. And there are a lot of people who disagree with him, Robert Redfield being one of them. And Robert Redfield is the former head of the CDC, who was actually the head of the CDC during the COVID pandemic.
And he got pushed out.
And he got pushed out because from the beginning, he felt like this was a lab leak. I, from the beginning, felt like this was a lab leak. One of the things that concerned me, and I kind of went off on a side trick there, but I want to go back to the hybrid harms hypothesis. During the attempts to develop a coronavirus vaccine after SARS and prior to 2019, the reason that a coronavirus vaccine was never brought to market is because they could not get past the animal trials. And the reason they couldn't get past the animal trials, they were using ferrets in the trials. They couldn't get past the trials because every time they would inject the animals with the experimental coronavirus vaccine, and then they would expose them to the coronavirus, and all of the animals died when they were exposed to the virus after getting the vaccine. That's called antibody-dependent enhancement. And it sounds like a good thing, and it is the opposite of a good thing.
It does sound like a good thing.
It does. It's like antibody enhancement. Yes, that's such a good thing. But it has happened before. There was a dengue fever vaccine that was developed. And they started giving it to, and it was approved, and they started giving it to children. And I think it was in the Philippines. And the children, after they were vaccinated, if they were exposed to dengue fever, they had very severe illness and deaths. And so they pulled that vaccine from the market. But antibody-dependent enhancement is something that I was concerned about, and many of the people who are considered anti-vaxxers and were a part of the disinformation dozen and all of that stuff were very concerned about with the COVID vaccine because that was the history. So getting back to Dr. Fauci and my feelings about coronavirus were like,
It's coronavirus.
it's a coronavirus.
It's been around.
Yeah, it's coronavirus. But then the more I watched Dr. Fauci's face during the COVID press conferences, to me, and I'm a student of human behavior, his facial expressions just clearly indicated to me that he knew a lot more than what he was saying, and that he was not being forthcoming. And I, because I knew about his history, that was concerning to me. So where I think a lot of people, when getting to, there is no such thing as a coronavirus, and the comments that you got in the Facebook group, let's talk about that.
Oh my gosh. All right, guys. So, I come from a world of, my dad was a chiropractor. I was never vaccinated. Once I hit practice, that I just kind of took it for granted. I didn't question it that much, but I will never forget the day it changed. I had a patient from Arkansas. She came in with her husband, and their son was 16 or 17. He was working as a Walmart greeter, but severely affected by the MMR vaccine.
MMR. Measles, mumps, rubella.
Completely normal baby. Mom put him in the car, in his little car seat that morning. And she said she would never forget. She held him down because he was screaming when they were vaccinating him. I'm sure you've heard the story before. And he was limp when she put him in her back seat. And she never got her little boy back. And the thing that haunted me was, she said, I held him down.
Yeah.
And I didn't even ask what was in, I didn't even look at the pamphlet
Well,
that I have to give you.
So, and as parents, and that story brings tears to my eyes, because so many times when I've heard it,
Yeah.
and lived it, in my own life. And we blame ourselves.
Yes.
And that is a fuel that just pushes us. And in my own situation, there is a saying within the group that within the community, and I've heard Bobby Kennedy say this, and he's right. The mother of a vaccine injured child does more research and better research than the CIA.
Absolutely.
Because it happened to your child. It happened to my child. I was already a researcher. I was already nationally recognized for my research abilities when it clearly happened to my child. So I didn't become, Dr. Google. I was already a researcher. And many, many parents of vaccine injured children have become excellent researchers. You don't necessarily have to have, you don't have to have a PhD or a master's degree.
No.
And the thing is that all of this is hidden in plain sight. If you go to the FDA website and look at the vaccine manufacturer's inserts and look at the ingredients, holy crap. If you put those ingredients in a baby bottle and handed it to your child, you would be arrested for attempted murder. And doctors don't know what they're injecting.
And that's why it drives me crazy, Marcella, on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You will always get the comments, well, I am going to trust the experts. I'm going to trust my pediatrician, my child's pediatrician who went to school. Well, and we will, because this is a whole rabbit hole, but who funds medical schools? Mostly pharmaceutical companies, the Pfizers, the Modernas, they're the ones that decide and choose what medical doctors learn in school.
That's exactly true. And nurses too. I had my former daughter-in-law, when she was pregnant with my second from her grandchild, she was a NICU nurse. And we had this conversation about vaccines, and she was, giving me lip service and not really going down the rabbit hole with me. Understandable, because there's a whole lot of brainwashing, which I was party to as well. But I was like, okay, let's just, where's your nursing book? Where's your clinical nursing book? She went and got it, this great big book, open it up, went to the publication page, Eli Lilly, major pharmaceutical manufacturer. And this was in Indiana. So Indiana based, but it was like, you have to consider where the information is coming from. And in 2016, I believe it was, I was at a DAN conference, Defeat Autism Now conference. And there was a panel. This was after the film Vaxxed came out. Yeah. And there was a panel after they showed the film. There were 1,000 people in the room. On the panel was several of my friends, including Del Bigtree and Polly Tommy, but also on the panel was Dr. Rachel Ross, who a lot of people will remember Dr. Rachel Ross. She was Dr. Rachel on the TV show The Doctors. And she was a practicing physician and still is. And she's a very smart woman, MD, PhD, both. And she was part of the film Vaxxed. And during that period of time, she learned a lot that she didn't know previously. I got past the microphone because it was a question and answer period. And I asked her, I said, please tell us, during your period of time as a student who was learning and practicing to become a physician who was going to be administering vaccines, what did you learn? What were you taught in your training about vaccines? Did you learn about ingredients? Did you learn about how they're studied? Did you learn about adverse reactions? Did you learn about VAERS, about where to report adverse reactions? What were you taught? And she said, honestly, and her response was so raw and truthful. Mm-hmm. She said, we didn't know anything about ingredients. We weren't taught anything about ingredients. We weren't taught about how they were studied. We weren't taught about how to recognize reactions. We weren't taught about VAERS. Honestly, it was like a robot, blindly following, without any data, And I was so thankful for her honesty and so thankful that we got it on tape and on video.
What a great question.
Well, I mean, it just, it's one of those things, and I know that you know this. There's so much stuff going on, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, ask this, say this. And that's one of those moments. And I was really, really grateful. But that is it. And so after that, I posted on my Facebook. I have a pretty good sized Facebook following. At that time, probably about 25,000 followers on Facebook. And so, and I know that I have a lot of doctors and nurses who follow me on Facebook because they interact with me. And so I posted on my Facebook page and I said, please tell me what you learned. If you are in the medical profession, if you're a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, what did you learn in your training about vaccines? Did you learn about ingredients? They learn the schedule. And that's what Dr. Ross says. Here's the schedule. Here's how you give them. They cure diseases. They've saved millions of lives. And that's what we learn. And now they've added an additional little segment that they're teaching doctors and nurses. And that is how to belittle parents. And
literally, that's a class?
Well, I don't know about if it's a class, but it's definitely a discussion. And I've had enough discussions with doctors and nurses. By the way, that post on Facebook is still circulating, and it has hundreds, probably thousands of replies by now. I created a Substack article on it.
You've got a ton of followers, and we're going to post Marcella's pages that you guys can follow her. She has incredible information, always well researched.
Thank you. Well, this Facebook post, a lot of my Facebook posts have turned into Substack posts, and there is an article on my Substack, and it's entitled "What Do Doctors Know About Vaccinations?" Because we're told, ask the doctor, trust the nurse, trust these people.
Ask your pediatrician.
They don't know because they're not being taught.
And Marcella, I'm genuinely asking the questions. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but don't pediatricians get financially incentivized to meet vaccination quotas?
So there are incentives for vaccination quotas. And this is why so many pediatricians have been firing families from their practice.
I used to think they felt strongly, but no, they don't want to mess up their ratios.
There's an incentive. There's a very big incentive. Money, yes. And it's if you have 63% of so in a pediatric practice, the average pediatrician sees about 1,500 patients, and that's their patient load.
Right.
And if they have 63% of their patient population fully vaccinated according to the CDC schedule, including yearly flu shots, and until just recently, COVID shots starting at 6 months of age, then if you hit that 63% magic mark for your patient population under 2, then you are rewarded with a bonus at the end of the year of $400 per patient in the entire practice as a bonus. That can run into millions of dollars for large practices with multiple pediatricians. Now, here's the thing. This angers a lot of people at pediatricians. And I have to say, I know some pediatricians, and I recently met a wonderful pediatrician. So COVID has had a good side to it, and that is that there are pediatricians who have walked away from mainstream practice. They were fully on board with everything until they started recommending COVID shots for kids. And they're like, nope, not doing that. So that's a good thing. There is an awareness that's going on here.
It shifted, I think, cultural perception, and now we're finally talking about it.
Now we're finally talking about it.
So
some of us have been talking about it, screaming about it for a long time, but more people are feeling empowered to talk about it and empowered to investigate and to say, you know what, I need to look further. And that has been the blessing of COVID, is that people are saying, I need to look further into this because something is not adding up and something is not making sense. But getting back to the pediatricians, I had a really good conversation, long conversation with a pediatrician who did that, who walked away from her practice because of COVID. She's in North Carolina.
Okay.
And there are many, many, many of them. And she was saying, this anger at pediatricians, I never saw any bonuses. Here's the thing. I saw this happen in Indiana. So it used to be that, pediatricians had their own practices, but they've all been bought up by HMOs. They've all been bought up by these big hospital management.
That's where
right?
the money goes?
So the HMOs own the pediatric clinics. In Indiana, several years ago, there was a clinic, a pediatric clinic, where this mom had been taking her kids for years, multiple kids, never had a problem. The pediatrician that she was seeing didn't vaccinate her kids. They have this thing, they were on the same page. All of a sudden, with a new baby, she starts getting harassed by the pediatric office about bringing the baby in for well baby checks. There's no reason to go to a well baby check if you're not vaccinating, because those are vaccine appointments. So there are benchmarks, and they get paid. It influences the amount of money that the practice or the overarching organization, the hospital system, receives for their Medicare reimbursement, which is big. It changes the amount of money that they receive from insurance reimbursement is tied to vaccine uptake and percentages.
Oh my gosh, the rabbit hole.
There's so much financial incentive. And so when if a pediatrician works for a big group under a hospital management organization, the pediatrician may not even know that this is going on. And so the anger at pediatricians, my brain wants to say maybe displaced, but I can't make myself say that, because then you get into, okay, you don't know what you don't know. You are celebrated, made into a hero, all of this adulation, and it has been drilled into your head that this is going to save. You can't do it. There's no way that this is a bad thing. Vaccinations, antibiotics, steroids, those are the three main tools of a pediatrician. The vaccines increase the inflammation. They cause an immune system disruption, increase ear infections, respiratory infections, all of these things back into the office. And there's it's maddening that there doesn't seem to be any ability to put two and two together. Even in pediatric practices, I have a friend, Carrie, in Indiana. Her baby died from a DTaP vaccine that she was hounded to giving him. He was 4 months old. The pediatrician said, if he gets whooping cough, he's going to die.
So she was scared.
She was scared. She was bullied into giving him a DTaP vaccine, the only one he got that day. And within 12 hours, he was dead.
Mm.
And the pediatrician sent a stuffed animal to the funeral. No acknowledgement whatsoever. How many times, as a pediatrician, do you have to see a baby die
Within hours.
And not vaccination and not put two and two together? So the longer, the longer you are in practice and the more you see this, the less of a break you get, in my book. If you can't put two and two together and you are not listening to parents, then yes, that anger is justified.
Yes.
Whether you're receiving kickbacks or not.
That's how I felt after watching Thank You, Dr. Fauci, the new documentary. I challenge you to watch that.
Absolutely.
It's eye-opening. And if you cannot possibly watch that, listen to it, and not walk away with this incredible rage about our government, our medical systems, what happened there. I personally believe in a God, and I believe in an afterlife. And if he does not face a reckoning, I don't know who would.
Right.
There is so much evil. You know, you said good things came from COVID, and that is true. It opened our eyes. We learned to think for ourselves. We no longer just accepted the status quo. The peels fell off the eyes, as we say in South Africa, of many, many people that never asked questions before. But I think also one of the bad things, Marcella, is something we talked about, is this incredible anger and how it's dividing the United States and countries like Australia, New Zealand, other countries. We go on and I post something I fiercely believe in, which is the treatment of long COVID, of these desperately ill kids. Now, they're at the Spero clinic, my clinic. They're here because they're at least open to holistic medicine. So many of their parents were open-minded before and they never vaccinated their kids. But I cannot say somebody suffers from long COVID on Facebook or Instagram without being cursed at, made fun of. It's a nasty movement too, you know.
It can be very nasty. And welcome to my world.
I don't like your world.
I know. But you know what? It is very gratifying. I saw you talking about hitting block and delete.
Yeah.
That is so. Sometimes I go to I see a post come through, and it might be like through, you know, from a public health agency or whatever, and it comes through my feed because my friends are interacting on it. So I'll go to that, you know, and I'll just like go down the list, and anybody who's supportive of that post, I just go block. And it's like, it feels so good. It's like, you're out of here. So it is gratifying. But so let's talk about long COVID and the reaction that you're getting. So within the anti-vaccine movement, there's a huge continuum of people.
I've learned that.
A very big continuum of people. And some of those people are, you know, vaccine injury is something that does not discriminate. It doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat or independent. It doesn't care.
It's not about politics.
It doesn't care if you're Christian or Muslim or atheist. It doesn't care if you live in a multi-million-dollar home or in your car. Vaccine injury affects everyone at every level. So people who within the anti-vax movement, it really is a microcosm of the entire population.
Yes.
And so you have people that within the movement, there are people who are very, very good friends and who've known each other for many, many years. I'm blessed. I have been blessed by some of the, another saying, some of the greatest people I wish I'd never met because of the thing that brought us together.
Yes.
But there are groups, and they're small. There are subgroups that are small that can be incredibly abusive.
Yes.
Part of it is paranoia, and rightfully so. Trauma, when you trust, like we did, and we held our babies down because we thought that we were doing the right thing. It's analogous to me. It's analogous to having your child growing up in a Catholic church where they're being molested by the priest. The pediatrician is the priest in this scenario. So there is a lot of anger among people because we trusted, and our children were harmed because we trusted. When you go through that kind of a situation, that's trauma, that's PTSD, and it makes it very, very hard to trust in any situation because we trusted blindly and we were hurt and our kids were hurt, and sometimes our kids were killed. So there is a lot of trauma, and whenever you have a whole lot of people who have a lot of trauma, you're going to have a lot of drama. There's always drama, and it permeates this movement. There is a subgroup within the movement that believes very strongly that viruses do not exist. There's no such thing as a virus. It's all detox. There's some pretty convincing arguments on that side. And I had a very, very good friend, Sean Siegel, who was an amazing activist. He was one of my board members when I had Vax Truth, an organization that I founded. And Sean can make a very convincing argument that there's never been an isolated virus.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I've got a really good friend in Suzanne Humphreys and some other really smart doctors who say, wait a minute, that's going a little too far. I think there's arguments on both sides, but the group that absolutely believes there's no such thing as a virus has taken over the long COVID conversation in some respects. They will infiltrate your groups. They infiltrate my page. And I just go, I'm not arguing with these people. I'm just block, delete, block, delete.
You can't
argue. No, it is a belief that is so strong that it is a religious belief. It's like a religious zealot belief.
Yeah.
And you can't change those. So don't try. Protect yourself. But here's the thing about that. In my understanding and research, going back to the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, my belief was that this is a lab leak. This is the result of a lab leak. And I know that. I mean, I felt that. I knew that internally. I knew that with every fiber of my being because I have watched lab leaks. Ebola, Zika, all of these things, anthrax, smallpox, all of these were the result of lab leaks in the last 15, 20 years.
You made a comment, if I may interrupt,
Yeah.
yesterday that stuck with me, Marcella. You said if the general public knew how often those leaks happen,
Yeah.
no one would sleep.
It's terrifying.
Soundly at night.
It would be terrifying. And that was the thing. That was the thing that made me concerned about coronavirus. I would not have been as concerned about it. I would not have gone beyond the stage if it had not been for my understanding of previous lab leaks, my understanding of gain of function research, and my understanding of Anthony Fauci from the beginning. I knew that Anthony Fauci had outsourced gain of function research to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And I knew that, I think it was 2017. It was sometime between 2015 and 2017 because it was published in, I think it was in Bloomberg, but it was published in one of the financial pages about outsourcing gain of function research. And there was a moratorium on it in the United States because it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
So I knew that had happened. So when it started and it was Wuhan, I was like, okay. So my question was, how bad is this going to get? So to those people who say there is no such thing as coronavirus, I would say, this is not a virus. This is not a standard virus.
It was man-made.
There is a splice. And I encourage people, like Dr. K just said, to really watch. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. It's a very, very important documentary. It's on Angel. Angel is, if you Google Angel and thank you, Dr. Fauci, you'll find it. And again, you may have to pay for a subscription that is totally worth it.
Yes.
Not expensive, very much worth it. And you can share it. Once you join and get your subscription, you can share it with others. So there is something called a furin cleavage that was inserted into what was a coronavirus. They inserted it into that. That furin cleavage is what makes it more transmissible between humans and more virulent. There are also some suspicious things going on with the spike itself.
Yes.
That causes, it looks like, and behaves very similar to the HIV virus. And that is what is happening with long COVID, is this immense immune dysregulation affecting the T cells and the immune cells with dysregulation. And it's very real. Is it because of a virus or is it because of a bioweapon? This relationship between the United States government, Health and Human Services entities in the past and the United States military for gain of function research. The reason for that in the first place, the stated reason, is for military preparedness. Weapons. So for those people who are saying, who are criticizing you or going to criticize me because I'm talking about a virus and there's no such thing as viruses, I'm not talking about a virus. I'm talking about something that never existed until it was created. And the reason for its creation was to increase infectivity and increase severity.
It's interesting to me when you say all these things. You're much more knowledgeable than I am about the actual virus, bioweapon, whatever you want to call it. But I was doing so much research when I was writing Neurochaos, how long COVID rewired the brains of our children. And it's going to be out in February. We'll post the link. You can pre-order, unfortunately, only on Kindle. But I told you, it struck me after a while that this thing seemed to have been, these are my personal feelings, bioengineered for maximum damage.
Yeah.
It can breach the blood-brain barrier,
Yes.
which is very uncommon.
Maybe not. Yeah. Things can breach the blood-brain barrier more often than what we think. And part of what causes things to breach the blood-brain barrier is polysorbate 80. And polysorbate 80 is something that is in many, many, many vaccines. Polysorbate 80 is used in cancer drug trials. They pair it with drugs that they want to get into the brain for brain cancer because it opens up the blood-brain barrier and it will walk the medication into the brain. So polysorbate 80 is a big deal. And polysorbate 80 and polyethylene glycol are very closely related. And polyethylene glycol is what the lipid nanoparticles are made of that are encasing the code of the coronavirus, of the spike protein, to make the spike protein. What I wanted to say about a follow-up on this, the spike protein issue, when they tracked these people who had gotten vaccinations, the COVID shots, what they found was in a subset of the population. So there's this huge immune response. People were having really bad reactions, and they were like, "Oh, this is how I know it's working. It's so good. I feel like crap." What they found was that, especially in young people with healthy immune systems, they tended to have worse outcomes because their immune systems are reacting so strong. They are continuing to produce spike protein up to 2 years after their last COVID shot. And that spike protein is toxic and it continues to go. So one of the things that is coming out about long COVID, so there are people who are suffering from long COVID who never got the shots. People who got the shots and are suffering from long COVID or long vax, and people who got shots and COVID who are suffering, and those are the ones who seem to be suffering the most, according to the research. So one of the other things that has come out is that people who have MTHFR genetic mutations and mutations in their methylation pathway. The methylation pathway is how we detoxify from environmental exposures. And this is that epigenetic gene-environment interaction. The people who have long COVID, and especially the people who did not get the shots and who have long COVID, appear to be, according to what research is there now, appear to be more likely to have MTHFR genetic mutations. And from what I am seeing and hearing, they are also more likely to have heavy metal toxicity and or mold exposure. Mm-hmm. So we think about this as kind of a perfect storm. So if they did not have a genetic vulnerability that decreases their ability to detoxify from other environmental toxins,
yes,
then they may not have had such a bad outcome from a coronavirus infection, whether it's a viral or bioweapon. whatever that argument is. But because the genetics are different, just as with what we see with autism and serious vaccine injury, it's not a genetic predisposition to autism. It's a genetic predisposition that affects the ability to detoxify, which increases the overall toxicity of the body.
Gun is loaded.
The gun is loaded, and then the trigger hits, and boom, there's regression, or there's an explosion of inflammation, and then there's immune system disruption and gastrointestinal issues and brain fog and all of these things. It's not really different from what we see with children who have serious vaccine injuries. And again, there are children who have autism who've never had a vaccine.
Yes.
But our environment is so full of toxicity. Vaccines are still one thing that we can control. We can say no as parents, and we can't always, control the environment. Some people live in an area. Some people don't have the money to move. Some people don't have the resources to fix their homes. They don't have, so there are a lot of people who are and a lot of children, a lot of vulnerable people, vulnerable from a genetic standpoint,
Right.
who are already at a very high level of dis-ease in their body. They have a high level of toxicity, a high level of inflammation. They may look perfectly fine because they haven't developed clinical symptoms yet. And then something comes along and pushes them into that clinical realm of expression. And then you get all of these things that you're dealing with long COVID. Long COVID, I think, is very, very similar to other forms of vaccine injury, whether or not they've had the vaccine. It's a total load theory, which is something that has been talked about a lot recently. It's a total load theory. So what I would say to those people who say, there is no such thing as long COVID without vaccination, there's a whole nother issue there, and that is the shedding of the COVID shots.
And that affects all of us.
That affects all of us. And they do shed. Dr. Pierre Corey has done a tremendous amount of work on this. And it's not just, some people say, well, if your husband got it or your boyfriend got it, or if you're dating, you got to be really careful. Don't sleep with somebody who's had the mRNA, because it does. Spike protein accumulates, and for women too, it accumulates really heavily in the ovaries, and it accumulates in the sperm. It is so sexual. And in the Pfizer, in the clinical trials, they said no sex during the clinical trials because they knew that this was going to happen.
It can transmit that way.
It can transmit that way, but it can also, what they've learned, really, really smart researchers have learned, is that it is, spike is expressed in exosomes. So you don't have to sleep with somebody, you just have to be around somebody who's breathing.
All my patients,
right,
that I saw during that time.
Yeah.
So Marcella and I spoke prior to starting this series. I think our biggest issue was the massive amount of information. So we're going to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So I think that is our intro today.
Yeah.
We're going to cover, guys, and please like and subscribe, especially if you're on YouTube, so that you're notified of our next episode. Marcella's going to be on for quite a few episodes. We have spike protein to get through, long COVID to get through, and we're not going to leave you guys without any tools,
right? Because
it is what it is, and what do we do now?
So there are, for anybody who wants to start looking for information, there's actually the Independent Medical Alliance, IMA.org. They have a lot of information about long COVID and about what kinds of things are working. They're one outfit. There's another one, the World Council for Health, is Tess Lawrie's group. They have some really good information too. It's a lot, and especially if you're dealing with brain fog and, to kind of get through that. But there are some things that can be helpful, but it's also, because of the way this thing behaves, it touches everyone differently. And so that's one of the things that's making it so difficult, is because From what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing with a lot of friends is that their vulnerabilities, their genetic vulnerabilities, will manifest with this, with exposure to spike protein, whether it's from infection or injection.
Yes.
The injection is many, many times, it produces spike protein in a greater amount. And depending on the immune reactivity and the strength of the immune system, it can go on for a very long time. They cut off the study at 2 years. They don't know how long some people are continuing to produce spike protein after vaccination. So it takes a long time to bring it down. Once it gets high, it takes a long time to bring it down. But that is a primary target of the therapies that seem to be having the most success.
So, Marcella, we're going to talk about those things
Yes.
as well. I love the way you present information. I think it's because you've had to educate somebody that has never heard anything bad about vaccines so many, probably thousands of times in your life, that you are really, really good at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I am so grateful that you're doing the series with me.
too.
And if you guys could share this, we'd really appreciate
Yes.
it. We're not going to wait weeks to come
No.
out with the next episode. So again, like and subscribe. I'm going to put my book link underneath and your Substack.
Substack?
I know you don't fully trust Facebook anymore, and no wonder after COVID.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you get kicked off Facebook?
I did not get kicked off, but I spent a lot of months in Facebook jail.
In Facebook jail.
Yeah, I was put in Facebook jail. I'll tell you what was really eye-opening was when I published during the beginning of the pandemic COVID fiasco. I published an article from the peer-reviewed medical literature, probably from the Lancet or one of the top, New England Journal of Medicine, whatever, that people consider to be top-tier journals. We could get into that. But I published a peer-reviewed article on vitamin D and coronaviruses. And it was removed, and I was thrown in Facebook jail for 30 days. And I was like, okay.
The rules have changed.
Yeah. Well, they have, it has gotten a lot better, and I'm very encouraged by that. Sometimes I wonder if they're just giving us enough rope to hang ourselves, but it's not going to shut me up.
No.
Better men than Zuckerberg have tried.
All right. Thank you for joining today. I'm very excited. I'm worried about the next pandemic.
I am too.
I'm worried about how many people will remember the lessons that we learned from this one. So what can we do to make it better, to mitigate the horrible criminal things that were done to humankind, and then how to respond next time? And it's all about just informing yourself. What I always say to patients, I cannot say don't vaccinate your baby. I say, if you're going to hold your baby down to get vaccinated, you better know what is being injected into your child.
Exactly. Research the ingredients. If nothing else, go to the FDA website and look at the vaccine manufacturer's inserts for the vaccinations that your pediatrician is telling you that your child needs. And every parent should be looking at the CDC schedule, should know ahead of time what vaccinations their child is due for, and do their own research ahead of time and be prepared for those discussions. Because if you are not informed, you need to be the most informed person in the room. Because if something bad happens to your child, the pediatrician is not going to be held responsible. They have no liability whatsoever, and the vaccine manufacturer doesn't either. You are the one who is going to be left holding the bag.
Thank you, Marcella.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I love you. I
love
love
you
doing
too.
this with you. And we will be back for more.
Yes, we will.
Thanks.
Bye.